Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. Tonight we'll speak to the Minister for Digital and Financial Services about blockchain, to the President of the Gibraltar American Chamber of Commerce about the US elections, and to the Northern Defence's Project Director about an important discovery there. First though, we talk to the leader of Together Gibraltar, Marlene Hassan Nahon, about Covid-19, the economy, Brexit, the environment, racism and more. Marlene Hassan Nahon, leader of Together Gibraltar, MP, thank you for joining us on Viewpoint.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
We're speaking to you on Thursday morning in an outdoor space, plenty of ventilation, 2 meters apart, in order to be able to not need a mask and in order for people to be able to follow what we're saying more easily.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate the compliance that you have afforded me.
Well, likewise, in hosting us.
Thank you.
Can you tell us how you think Gibraltar is faring with the Covid-19 pandemic?
Well, obviously I think that the Covid-19 pandemic has had devastating consequences for public health and the global economy. We are still 3 to 6 months away from a vaccine, in fact maybe even closer from latest reports, but I don't think that we're going to be going back to normal in the next at least 6 to 9 months from now, I think at the very best. I believe that Gibraltar has been very, very lucky with the pandemic because we have had a high number of cases, but all in all they have been mild in the circumstances, and I also think that there has been an element of good management with contact tracing, with a lot of testing, isolating people. I also believe that we've had very good community spirit in the earlier part of the pandemic, more than now, where we see that these the attitudes are getting a little bit tired and wearing a little bit thin and almost understandable. But I do think that that has something to do with the mixed messaging and some level of populism by our political leaders that has sort of garnered some sense of distrust among the community.
Why do you say populism?
Well,
because when you say populism, people tend to think of, dare I say it, Donald Trump.
The government of Gibraltar hasn't been firm enough and resolute enough and hasn't gone with the courage of the convictions that they should have at a time like now, which is very, very crucial and very dangerous. We've seen only a couple of weeks ago the government advising to wear masks when they should have put the legislation then and there, and then days later they legislate for it. We've seen, for example,
on that example, when they're just giving people the benefit of doubt and saying we don't want to make this mandatory, we invite you to do it because we think that it is the right thing to do, but we want you to do it of your own volition, and they gave people a chance, and then they thought that people hadn't responded adequately.
I don't think it's fair to put that onus on the population in the same way as you say, I don't think you should drink and drive, so I advise you not to. If something is dangerous and if something is bad, and if at the same time you're putting banners everywhere saying it's bad for you, so we advise it, governments should have the courage of their convictions and the strong leadership to mandate it for the sake of everybody and everybody around everybody who's having to take the measures. It's as simple as that. We've seen this, the mixed messaging, for example. We've seen a photo of the Chief Minister having his flu jab, smiling without a mask, beside the medical director having the same jab in the same frame. There is public health advice that suggests that more than 15 minutes, of course, can add to the viral load and the aerosols in the air. But the fact of the matter is that if you have a medical director with a mask and a chief minister without a mask, it sends a conflicting message, in the same way as if you're telling people that they have to put a mask on in the gym, and then when there's an uproar in social media, you're sort of clarifying the point in a different way, and then you're not sort of protecting the teachers in schools who are dealing with children all the time who might not be wearing masks, children who we know are a vector for the disease and spreading it around, and the teachers feel unprotected, whereas in other indoor spaces you'll have to wear a mask. There are many conflicting messages which is leading to distrust, and coupled with that, the misinformation that is being spread all around social media.
So you said that earlier on Gibraltar showed great community spirit. But you think now that we've become more polarized and people are questioning not just political decisions, but also public health advice?
Yes, I believe they are. And when you think about it, when we're talking about mask wearing and the uproar that has come from it, mask wearing, we know from CDCs around the world and peer-reviewed studies that they help to lighten the viral load. They help to limit the spread. They effectively, because of those factors, help the economy, because you will inevitably avoid a lockdown the more that people wear it and the more that people limit the spread. So clearly the messages are not being circulated efficiently, and people are not understanding the importance of the message, and that is something that worries us. I mean, at the end of the day, Jonathan, if people are sick in hospital, YouTube and Google isn't going to save them. It's going to be our public health authorities, and they deserve every support and as much compliance as possible in order for us to get through this crisis as best as possible.
So, to be clear, you think that people should not be questioning what the public health advice is coming from Public Health Gibraltar?
I'm not saying that people shouldn't be questioning. Questioning is always healthy, but I think that people should be respecting the public health advice and doing what they need to do to protect themselves and people around them.
Okay, we invited questions on our social media and via email. And I thought I'd bring some in as we touch upon subjects, and there are a few comments in respect of masks. Gareth said that he used to walk on Main Street every day, but he has avoided the place since the new rules were introduced there. And maybe this is something that you could comment on. Charmaine said that she's walked down Main Street earlier this week in the early afternoon. People were not wearing their masks, or they were smoking and drinking, which allows them not to wear their masks. And she also saw another person spitting on the floor. He was not wearing a mask.
This is a direct result of these mixed messages that have turned our society into one that isn't now respecting the legislation. And this is something that also affects law enforcement officers who for a while, through these mixed messages, have had a big challenge in enforcing laws that were quite wishy-washy.
Michael has written in to ask about an anti-Semitic trope used by a commenter on social media that claimed that you had divided loyalty between Gibraltar and Israel. And you said that this was a new and dangerous phenomenon in Gibraltar politics, and you urged both the Chief Minister and Leader of the Opposition to condemn it. And Michael asks, are you satisfied with the response?
Yes, I'm definitely satisfied with the response from our political leaders who stood behind me in Parliament and beyond. The Chief Minister's had his own experience with one of the members of his own cabinet being targeted as well. He's of an ethnic minority also. But what really shocked me was the fact that many people didn't even realize that, you know, being accused of dual loyalty is an anti-Semitic trope. Being told, go back to your country, my country is Gibraltar. When I go to Israel, I am a tourist like you would be. There is a document called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance document, which is a working document that has been espoused by many Western democracies, which is a blueprint for what defines anti-Semitism. And I'm honestly quite sorry that I had to present this document to many leading bodies in Gibraltar who were not aware that being accused of dual loyalty is an anti-Semitic trope.
But was this something of an isolated comment? I mean, it wasn't a big enough deal, if I can put it to you this way, to bring the Jewish community officially into the debate. It was...
Well, I didn't bring the Jewish community officially into the debate. I was representing the issue of anti-Semitism, not just because I'm a Jew. I represent issues of racism and bigots that attack all sorts of minority all the time. I just happen to be a Jew this time, and I don't think there is such a thing as a little bit of anti-Semitism or a lot of anti-Semitism in the same sense as it applies to racism in general. Racism is racism, anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism, and if we don't cut it at the moment from top to bottom and bottom to top, we are not helping our society. It starts off very small, but it can get very big. And this is something that we saw with the Labour Party in the UK, where things were allowed to fester until the monster grew so big that the Labour Party didn't actually know how they were going to deal with it, because it was out of control until we've seen recently what's happened with Jeremy Corbyn.
I'm just trying to get a sense for how big a problem do you think racism and racist comments are in Gibraltar at the moment?
I think that there is a lot of racism in general and anti-Semitism. And
in Gibraltar?
I think there is. I just think that it's sort of kept under the radar, and every now and then you get this little bit, this little nugget coming up which symbolizes that it's really there, and it's not just anti-Semitism. You've seen it against the Moroccan-based community in Gibraltar and the Hindu community. I think everybody has suffered some racism and continues to.
Let's return, if we can, to Covid-19, which is an all-consuming topic. What impact has it had on the provision of health services generally, a service which you have taken a very keen interest in Parliament?
Well, I think that we can't forget the effect of indirect COVID, which is the fact that there have been backlogs in hospital for screenings, for operations, access to doctors, to GPs has been limited, and this obviously is having an effect on general health care, which we're going to see into the future. And of course, I have asked in Parliament about these backlogs and about the fact that the health service is not working as it should, and I have been assured that by December was the month that I was told things would get back to normal, but that does not really help those people who might have pressing health issues at the moment and need to be seen. And that is a great concern, because whilst we are foolproofing all the services in case we do come into a crisis, we're not in crisis at the moment, thankfully, and yet other sectors of healthcare are suffering. I was in the summer months, I was contacted by some women who were finding delays with mammographies, for example. On the abortion issue, we have postponed the referendum, which at the time was understandable, but for how long will that referendum be postponed, and how long will women not have access to healthcare in that way?
So how do you balance both those two things? On the one hand, your sort of position for strong measures, as you put it, to curb the pandemic, and on the other, your desire to see a vote on the abortion issue as soon as possible?
Well, on the abortion issue front, I think that nowadays, with the technology that we have, and the fact that people vote proxy in elections generally, we could have a safe and secure system in order to post a vote or vote online, or have some kind of infrastructure to have this referendum. I mean, we can't postpone it for forever, and the government can be forgiven for a period of time, but considering that we have online services, and the government has hailed their e-government platforms as coming into force soon, and we are in 2020, I'm sure that something could be done in order for people to postal vote, or people to vote socially distanced, as we've seen in many states in America, slowly, progressively, over days. It can be done in the same way as people go to school and people go to town.
On the topic of the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on health, we've got a question from Kaylin, who says the more stringent COVID measures that you have recently championed have had a negative impact on local businesses, according to the Federation of Small Businesses, and also people are being told that they cannot visit their loved ones in residential homes because of for safety reasons. But he sort of underscores the importance of such visits for people who are residents in these homes, not to mention the effects that the pandemic is having on mental health for many people. Do you regret pushing as far as you have?
Absolutely not. The two issues that Kaylin has brought up are different in my view. Firstly, when we want to protect businesses, there's no better way to do that than by having masks, because masks, again, they impede the spread of the virus. They lower the viral load. So they will protect the economy, because we won't have to be led into another lockdown. And if all it takes is to put a covering in front of your face for the economy to continue ticking, because not everybody's catching a strong COVID at the same time, that is exactly what we should be doing. In terms of the residential homes, I actually believe strongly that, of course, as people who are vulnerable, the elderly, need to be protected, and public health will be always looking to protect people's lives over anything, it's understandable that they have taken strong measures, as would I, if I was in a position of authority, in order to protect these people. I did have an interchange with somebody yesterday online who provided us with a very good idea, which is something that admittedly I hadn't considered, and that is to section off parts of elderly care facilities for elderly patients who might be completely compos mentis and completely robust in terms of mentally, who might want to be in touch with their loved ones, and that is their freedom. And as long as they would sign some sort of disclaimer and those loved ones would go for a period of time to visit them under the right protocols, I don't see why that can't be done. If the resources are available to find a way, in the same way as we isolate ourselves, if there's a way to find a robust way that they can isolate afterwards before coming back, I just find it a little bit convoluted in the sense that I can't see public health finding a perfect way to make this happen in a non-risk way for the others. I get that. But if they could, it makes sense in terms of their own personal freedoms, because Jonathan, this is a very difficult situation, and I am very much at the forefront of it myself. I have a parent who is elderly and vulnerable, and I have to take decisions every single day as to whether I visit my mother and provide any risks for her, with balancing the fact that if I don't see her, her cognitive decline will be going down sharper and faster. And then there's always that dilemma of, if they've only got 6 months left or 2 years left, what's better, to leave them alone, to let them sort of die slowly alone, or to give them the love and the connection that they so need? Because as we all know, the older you get, the lonelier you can risk being, and that is a very, very difficult situation for families and loved ones. So I perfectly understand it, and I think it would all boil down to a good solid protocol in order for every party to be as safe as possible.
If we can move on to the impact that COVID is having on the Gibraltar economy, do you think that the government is doing the right things to try to mitigate that? Could it do something different?
I think the government has done a good job protecting employment, and has provided a series of packages in order to protect jobs and businesses. But I think that they've missed a trick in terms of, in fact, their Green Gibraltar ticket. I think on their Green Gibraltar ticket, well, they've failed in many ways.
Why did you say that?
Well, this government came in on a Green Gibraltar ticket, and all we've seen so far is a closed up road, traffic chaos. We're still using the same old diesel power station. We're still pumping raw sewage. We're still managing bunkering in the same way. We still don't have bike lanes. We're still not using renewables. And really, for an electric car infrastructure, the only person who really has the best access to that is the Chief Minister and his fleet of cars. So we're not doing much for the Green Gibraltar ticket. And all we're doing is making people have less faith in green mobility, which is something that we were very pro. And this
Well, I was going to say that Linewall Road was partly your idea.
Absolutely.
The GSLP Liberals said that they'd taken your idea from your manifesto.
Yes, they said they'd taken our idea from our manifesto, but we're still waiting to see it materialize. We had a very cohesive, phased plan in order to bring green mobility to Gibraltar, which is something that we still believe in, and this is why we have been giving government time to get this right. But we want people to believe in green alternatives. But the fact of the matter is that the implementation for what they say they're going to do based on our commitment is absolutely shambolic. It's driving people round the bend. It's not offering any green solutions. It's causing chaos, and it's making people resent the possibility of green mobility, which is very sad, really, because what we want is to inspire people, to educate people. And it's not materializing in any way. You can't just lock up a road and say that you've got green credentials. You have to actually see it through.
So what would be the most important thing that the government could do to make Gibraltar more green?
Well, I think they should be keeping to their commitment on this green mobility new artery that they promised, instead of closing it up and causing chaos. But when we were talking about the economy, and I was saying to you that yes, on one hand they have protected jobs and employment and offered loans and helped businesses defer on rates and rents and that. But many countries around the world have used the COVID pandemic as a moment for, as the World Economic Forum put it, the Great Reset, which is that a lot of the bailout packages and a lot of the public finance, the funding that they have afforded to businesses and to people has been used to reshift the economy into a greener, more digital way forward. And I think that is why the government has missed out on this opportunity, helping retail outlets to reinvent themselves in a more digital, green way, innovation, education, helping businesses to realign themselves into the future in a green and innovative way. So at the end of the day, even though we have helped businesses to stay afloat, we don't really have anything new to show for it.
And let me just apologize if the wind is interfering a little bit with the audio quality, but we have taken the conscious decision to do this interview outdoors, and that, I suppose, is the price to pay to make sure that we can do this interview in a way that doesn't carry any risk from a virus perspective. Okay, let's look at Together Gibraltar. I have a question from Chrissy. She thinks that you've lost members recently, including people who were candidates at last year's election. Does your party need to reposition itself?
Well, our party is a party that is obviously always taking very strong positions. And therefore, when you take strong positions, some people will disagree with those positions and some people will agree with those positions, and therefore you increase momentum. We've seen people leaving the government cabinet, Gilbert Likoudi's departure. People come and go, and that is normal. It's nothing that we worry about. We continue on our straight line, and in the same way as people have
renewing? Are you bringing young people into, or
yes,
new people into politics?
The party is always renewing. We have a youth committee that we have established recently, which is very energetic and full of people who are dying to actually get moving and feel very encouraged and engaged in the process. And we're also speaking to some very interesting highbrow people in the community, which gives us a lot of encouragement into the future and into the next election. So it's actually shaping up really well.
You smile, but obviously our viewers will be saying, can you name anyone?
Well, I'm not at liberty to name people, but I can assure your viewers, and I think one thing people know about me is that I mean what I say and I say what I mean. I can assure your viewers that we have a very interesting crop of people coming into the party, and that in the next months and couple of years, Together Gibraltar will be able to offer a very stable and solid outfit for the coming elections.
Okay, which brings me nicely to my next question, which is from Paul. Paul thinks that you will again split the vote at the next election, in all likelihood, ruining not just your chances, but also the GSD's. Have you thought of joining one of the other parties, a merger? Asks Paul.
Together Gibraltar as a third party is not just about finding a way into an alliance. We don't see ourselves like that. I think we've already done wonderful things for the political debate in Gibraltar. We have been a party that has forced other parties to take strong positions. We are not just sitting here to split any vote, and I believe that until now the binary system was there waiting for one party to decline in order for the other one to come in. So I think Together Gibraltar has already served a very, very valid purpose. Also, parties merge on ideology and values, and not just as a means of sort of kicking out any parties. And we have a lot of integrity in what we do. So I say always never say never, but we stand true to our values and principles, and the future will hold interesting possibilities for everyone, I'm sure.
Have you discussed a merger to date?
Well, I'm always having conversations with different figures in our political system. and I'm a very open-minded person, but that is not where priorities are lying right now. Our priorities are in recruiting members and in continuing our solid project and in providing Gibraltar with a truly progressive and solid outfit and project for the future.
Ben says being a single Together Gibraltar MP in opposition must be very lonely. Do you ever regret joining Frontline politics?
That's a good question. I'm very happy that I joined Frontline Politics because I feel like we've provided a very different perspective and a strong project for the future of Gibraltar. So I never look back. In Parliament, yes, it is lonely, but only in Parliament because I'm alone in my seat. But I feel very supported outside Parliament, and I received a very strong mandate from the electorate at the last elections, and that mandate was not just for me, that mandate was for my party. So we have every intention of fulfilling that mandate and working hard in order to make ourselves stronger for the next elections. There are challenges at the moment because we can't meet people face to face because of the current COVID crisis, and of course it makes it difficult to connect with people and continue the grassroots work that we are all about. We're actually having our first Zoom meeting with the membership in the next couple of weeks, which we have recently advertised, and we're trying to get back the grassroots and the engagement and participation of our members, which is what we're all about. So yes, in Parliament I feel a little bit lonely, but in the community in Gibraltar I feel very supported, I feel very encouraged by the election results, and we have every reason and intention to carry on providing a future project for the political discourse in Gibraltar.
And Rose says you're one of 2 women in Parliament and the only Together Gibraltar MP. Do you ever feel undermined in Parliament?
A lot, I do. I feel undermined many times. I always say that I realized the importance of the feminist cause when I got into Parliament, which was when I realized how skewed the political debate is in favor of men. But that is only normal when you have 15 men and 2 women. The interest and the perspective of women is not going to be represented, and this is why I want to encourage more women into local politics. We are 50% of the population, and we're entitled to have our fair share of the political conversation, and this is why it's so important, because for as long as we are a very small minority, we will not be respected in that way and considered in that way. So things have to change, and this is one of the things that we fight for all the time.
We're almost at the end of the interview, but I have to ask you, how do you think Gibraltar is positioned in respect of a future relationship with Spain and the EU?
Jonathan, I think it's important to say that the issue of Brexit is huge. It's going to be an issue that is going to define us for decades. Obviously, we know that the government is holding crunch time talks right now with their Spanish and UK counterparts. And we know also that Schengen is the issue of the day, and seeing how we're going to possibly see a way to become a member of Schengen in the future. I get briefed confidentially, so there's not that much that I'm at liberty to say, but I believe that right now what we need to do is to give the government space to negotiate on our behalf. Yes, in the briefings we provide feedback and views and any representation from stakeholders of Gibraltar. But right now is a moment to stand with the government in terms of trying to get the best deal, because the end game is the same for all of us. We all want economic prosperity, we all want fluidity at the border, and we all want to continue our way of life. So what we see in moments like these that we've seen in the past is that other parties locally will throw in their nationalistic, inflammatory comments and ape to be the architects of sovereignty, control and jurisdiction. And the truth is that we all are. We all have very similar red lines, and we all want Gibraltar to flourish in that way. So coming out with vacuous statements and making yourselves out to be the only custodians of our democracy in Gibraltar that are worthy of sort of managing Brexit talks.
You're having a pop at the GSD now?
Yes, I am having a pop at the GST because the GST actually has behaved no differently to the GSOP once upon a time when they were doing it in Sir Peter Caruana's day. And in this case, the GST, for example, saying that the cross-frontier workers have been bargaining chips in the treaty, in the tax treaty.
That they should have been used as.
That they should have been used as bargaining chips in the tax treaty. Cross-frontier workers are not bargaining chips. Cross-frontier workers, they contribute heavily to our economy, to our society, to our way of life, to our essential services, to our healthcare provision. We can't be talking in that way or saying that the tax treaty would have been changed if they came into office, which is something that is absolutely impossible because it wasn't even, signed by Gibraltar, so it couldn't have been taken away. So these vacuous statements, I think they rise the nationalistic sentiment in a way which is completely useless and damaging for Gibraltar, and it's something that we should not be even considering right now. We should be working together as a team, of course scrutinizing government in the briefings that we have, but not trying to take the moment for brownie points, because at the same time we're all in this together, and I think it's something that we need to consider and be benevolent with right now.
And finally, I couldn't leave you today without asking you, Donald Trump or Joe Biden?
I have to say Joe Biden. I can't possibly endorse somebody who is like a climate change denier, who said the other day that with 971 deaths in one day in America with the COVID crisis, it was no big deal, who infringes on the press freedoms and who is, trying to impede women's rights.
Your sister Fleur was a big fan of his foreign policy.
Well, and I can't blame her because she lives in the Middle East, and recently they saw the Abraham Accords, which afforded peace for the region with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. So she has a very different set of parameters for which she supports Donald Trump, and that is a matter for her. I will certainly not be endorsing Donald Trump because he's not in line with my values and my principles, and I think that's a very democratic position for us to have in our family, where each can decide what values they wish to represent.
Marlene Hassan Nahon, leader of Together Gibraltar and MP, thanks for your time.
Thank you.